I think a lot of people right now are going through what Carl Jung would call the dark night of the soul. I am. I am going through one right now, and I wanted to talk to you about it to share some of my experience and also to share some of the myths that people tend to have around this process that happens and hopefully offer some comfort and support because if nothing else, just knowing that you're not in it alone on some level is just, I think, really deeply healing and helpful. So this is one of the more vulnerable videos for me to make because I'm going through it myself and actually creating the space in myself to even sit down to do a video was a lot. Uh, I had some shift yesterday that allowed me to just gain a little tiny bit of clarity about something actually quite big that lifted my energy enough to where my thoughts went back to this idea of sharing this with you. So, one of the sort of telltale signs that you are in a dark night is the sense of being lost, this sense of all of a sudden being like, who am I? What am I doing? Why am I doing this? And I'll say too that it's not a momentary passing thought. It's a pervasive kind of experience that you're in for days on end. And you keep waiting for it to shift. You keep waiting for yourself to have some sort of insight, new awareness, something. And you're just lost. What helped me have this shift, and there's a reason I'm telling this, I decided to do an oracle reading for myself using my Wild Unknown Archetypes deck. And in the position of what my emotional life is right now, came up the card called the Desert. And it describes me to a T right now. The desert is unforgiving. It's seemingly empty. There is no nourishment. There is no support. There is no guidance. There is, no water. There is no clarity. You don't know which way you're going. You don't know when it's going to end. So I thought that was so poignant and so on point that that's why I'm sharing that with you. Uh, and so this sense of being lost, this sense of being confused, and my experience, I've been building a business, Sacred Dream Alchemy, for a little over a year. It's been very challenging. It's been really just confusing and hard and unpredictable, and I don't have a lot of capital to work with, so that's made it really sort of high pressure. And at the same time, I know that the work I do can't come from a pressured place. And so anyway, I'm in the middle of it. I'm doing it. I'm offering what I'm offering. I'm creating new workshops and new whatever else I'm offering, group immersion, the one-on-one work that I do, the different things that I'm teaching. I've been creating them. I've been, writing website pages. I've been promoting them, sending emails, all the things you do when you're building a business. And it seemed like a path, right? And it still does. I'm not giving up on it at all. But somewhere in the middle of this path, or maybe it's close to the beginning, I have no idea because I'm in the desert, but somewhere in there, all of a sudden, I started feeling very lost and very confused. And it went to the existential level of who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing this for? And how am I doing this? And who am I doing this for? And all of a sudden, all of these deepest questions started arising. And I think for me, it had to do with the fact that I really, really committed to this path of building Sacred Dream Alchemy and moving forward with bringing my gifts and bringing my capacities and the things that I really want to impart in the world to people who need me and the people who are my people. And the shadow work, the dream work, the shamanic work, the plant medicine work, I really committed to doing it. And some part of me freaked out. Some part of me was very scared and still is. And, they say you are not going to be able to bring the old you with you. And so I think that that's what happened for me is that somewhere on the path, if you think about you've started a hike, there comes a point when you can't go back. There is a point where you can, right? When you first begin, you start the hike, you realize, oh my God, this is going to be so much. I don't have the right gear. I don't have enough water. I don't have whatever I need. And you still can turn around. People don't usually have a dark night of the soul when they're in that space. They have the dark night of the soul when it's too late to turn around. And I even say the word too late, and I don't even mean it like that. What I mean is you're so far down the path, you're committed, right? Turning around would actually mean starting a new path. That's what it would mean. Even if you try to go back to what you used to do or some version of what you used to do, it would still actually mean starting a new path. And that's why this moment shows up and it can last for weeks. So when I say moment, I mean that metaphorically. It can, it shows up in that unconscious realization. And that's a weird oxymoron, but I think you know what I mean. When somewhere in you, when in your field, you are committed to this path, and it is a path that is unknown. There is so much that you don't know who you are, how to be, how to move forward, whether you're doing it quote unquote correctly. So many questions that you have to live the answers to instead of being told what they are. That's when the dark night shows up. Actually, how it showed up for me initially was I started feeling a sense of profound fatigue. I was just exhausted. And it wasn't physical fatigue. I got enough sleep. I had the energy to take my walks in the morning, uh, all the things to cook, to attend to all of my life necessities. It wasn't a physical fatigue, and yet I walked around just saying, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. Upon reflection, I realized that what I was tired of was the hustle, the constant onslaught of tasks when it comes to building a business, when it comes to building a life in a new place, which is, we've been here a little over a year in Colorado, and it's still new. And we still don't know a lot of people or almost any people here. Um, and so that's a new life. The business is a new life for me, especially, if you know anything about my story, I had a long-standing therapy practice, talk therapy, for over 12 years in New York. And then I released that practice and moved to Colorado to develop this, whatever this is, and to move forward with it in a new way. And I had to make the leap, even though on paper it was stupid and ridiculous and crazy uh, to jump without a net. But I knew that if I had a net, I wouldn't truly jump. I knew I would dabble, and I knew I couldn't dabble. Time was ticking. I was having a numerologically a 9 year, which felt, I was feeling it. I was feeling the completion. I was feeling the really intense need for to close a big chapter and to find the new octave of myself, which I knew I wouldn't do unless I just chose to close the practice altogether. So I was feeling exhausted, and I was like feeling exhausted from the hustle and from this sense that I have to find this new path in a culture that is dying, in a culture that is profoundly toxic, that I kind of lost the ability to navigate. I'm really good interpersonally. I'm really connecting with people is not hard for me anymore. It used to be. I was very afraid of people before, but I've really honed that. I'm really, um, connection is not hard, but most of my business is online, and connecting with people online is its own nightmare because people don't come online to connect anymore almost at all, especially social media, right? They come to zone out. And so for me, uh, I was feeling like I had to push a boulder up a mountain like Sisyphus every day when trying to share what I'm doing and who I am and what I'm building with a world that didn't seem to give a crap because everybody's exhausted, right? So this exhaustion I was feeling, I didn't gaslight myself into saying that it was my fault or that I was doing something wrong. I realized really quickly that it made so much sense why I was so tired. And part of what ended up happening for me was just not pushing myself so much. I had lists of when I was to send, this email or that, or put this post out or that, and I just threw it out the window. And I decided I needed to just rest. I needed to do what I felt like doing when I felt like doing it. Of course, I would show up to my sessions fully. And that also required me to have as much rest and free time and personal healing as I needed in order to continue showing up. So that's another piece to experiencing the dark night of the soul is when, your external life continues. Some people experience it when, let's say, their job ends, or I don't know, they retire, something big changes in their life. But sometimes, like for me, like I said, I was in the middle of it all. Still am in the middle of it all. But uh yeah, so I needed a lot of space to sometimes explore this and sometimes to just be completely useless, to be honest, to not be productive, to do things that felt good, to not necessarily do a ton of reflecting, although ultimately I did. But um, yeah, I just found myself profoundly frustrated with the cultural and social structures, the way the internet is, the way the social media is, all the onslaught of ads, and the fatigue of most people, the fact that prices are rising and fewer people are wanting to spend money on healing and deep inner work, things like that. And I just found myself frustrated and just had this intense aversion to all of it. I'm like, I cannot fight this. Which made me realize I was fighting it, right? That whole Sisyphus pushing a boulder up a mountain. I didn't feel like I was fighting, but if you read any recommendations or go to a coach or read a book about how to grow a business, you post a lot, you create content, you put things out there, you engage people, you create a community, you grow, 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 grow as much as you possibly can to engage people. And that's a fight. I don't know how else to put it. It's a journey, you can call it that. But honestly, when you're pushing against the um, constraints of, the medium that you're in, the financial situations, all of it, it does feel like a fight, and it felt like it to me. I haven't resolved how to deal with it other than just forget it. I can't fight. I'm just going to do what I can do. And chances are that's the surrender. Chances are that's when people end up coming to me, and that story you hear that, like, when you finally give up is when everything falls into place, and you can't give up until you are just completely fed up, and I guess that's where I'm at. um One of the myths that people have around experiencing the dark night of the soul is that you are depressed all the time. And that's just not true. You may have a lot going on. You may not have a depressed state or depressed feeling. It can very well just be something that is weighing on you somewhere in the back of your mind, or maybe all over your mind, but it's not necessarily a depressive state. You may well be very active. You may well be tending to your life. Like I said, I have not been physically exhausted. I've had energy to do whatever I wanted to do. Um, a doctor might have diagnosed me as depressed. I don't know. I haven't been to a doctor in a gazillion years because it's just not a necessary label for me. But maybe not even. I mean, I don't even think I have all the criteria to call it depression. But if I described my state of, I don't know who I am, and I'm lost, and I'm confused, and I'm exhausted, and, a doctor might say, you sound depressed. And it's just not helpful for me. And recognizing the dark night of the soul versus depression is actually incredibly freeing and incredibly validating, as opposed to it being, an imbalance of some sort. And so I don't see it as anything wrong. It is intensely uncomfortable. It is heavy. It is confusing. The desert is an unforgiving, punishing place. And actually, the only kind of reassurance I have is that ultimately it shifts, right? Ultimately, no state is permanent. And so at some point, this too shall pass. But I'm not saying that to minimize it. I've been in it as deeply as I could be in it. And I'll share personally, I mentioned earlier how this oracle reading I did shifted something for me. And I think, a dark night of the soul is not just something to endure, it is something to explore, right? You don't sit down in the desert and wait for the desert to pass. You still have to traverse the desert. You still have to pass it. You still have to crawl if you have to, right? Um, and so, aside from all of the journaling and self-reflecting that I've done, I decided to do an oracle reading to kind of receive some reflection, some guidance maybe, on what this dark night of the soul is for me. I know the external factors, right? I've described them, the business, the economy, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to know the archetypal factors. That's when the desert came up in the description of what my emotional energy is doing. But what was really profoundly helpful was in the center of the reading, which is, what is the core of this? What is the core that I'm both in and that I'm also being asked to embody? And again, I'm sharing this as has been personal for me in this dark night of the soul. This may not very well not be yours. Everyone's core thing is their own, right? But I just felt like sharing it because, again, one of the things that you feel in a dark night is intense aloneness. it feels like no one gets you. I don't think I actually mentioned that earlier, so I'm glad I thought of it now. There is this sense of, um, I can't explain this to anyone. I can't get anyone to understand what it's actually like for me on the inside. Why all of a sudden, when nothing is wrong on the outside, why all of a sudden do I feel lost? Why, like nothing's changed? Why do I suddenly not feel like I know who I am? And so intense aloneness. And if you're in a dark night, you may feel this way. And honestly, the only thing that helps is knowing other people might be going through their own, and also that the desert ultimately does end. But anyway, back to the reading. For the core card, what came up was the vow. The vow. And the vow is a question of, what vow am I living? What am I actually embodying? And this could be conscious or unconscious. And most of the time it's unconscious. We don't even know. We've kind of been embodying a vow of, whatever, poverty or silence or something like that. And a vow of silence doesn't mean you're mute. It means you don't say what you need to say or things like that. And I really was, first I was surprised by this card, and then it made perfect sense, of course, because my vow was unconscious. And pulling this card and sitting with the question of what vow am I living helped me understand and unearth what it is. And that's how I suddenly kind of felt a little bit of a shift. And, don't expect shifts to be permanent, right? I'm not saying, oh, good, that one reading, I get it now. And now I'm done with the dark night. No, it's the desert is as long as the desert is, right? I realized that the vow I've been living is the vow that I must suffer for everything. I must suffer to get validation. I must suffer to get connection. I must suffer to learn any lesson. I must suffer to receive any kind of compensation. Money, of course, has all kinds of stories tied into it for most people. Um, and I realized that that was an unconscious story that I've been living, where I believed that uh, as long as I'm suffering is how I can possibly get anything, get anywhere, find anyone, receive anything. And the other thing too, this isn't even Dark Knight related, but just a realization by itself is only a marker. It's only the beginning, right? This story is wired into my system. And I knew it on some level. I'd been aware that, like, this is years ago, but I was aware that I was living as a victim. Like, everything was happening to me. Like, I wasn't blaming people. I was actually blaming myself for everything, but that's still victimhood. That's still poor me energy. That's still like, oh, I can't. And so anyway, realizing the vow of suffering, that's sort of like the larger, I don't know, octave of the victim lens. So the victim I had been undoing steadily for a long time. And I've no longer feel like I'm a victim of my circumstances or I'm a victim of anything, really. Everything is here to teach me. I'm here to learn. I'm here to see everything as a mirror for what I need to see in myself. But realizing this vow of suffering was this larger kind of circle around the victim. Um, Suddenly something clicked where I see a little, I don't see the end of the desert, but I see a few footsteps. I see just a couple of feet in front of me. of how to work, or rather what to work with, where the story of suffering is actually manifesting in every single situation, even the day-to-day stuff. And I'll spare you all of that. That's not the point of this video. And again, this is only one person's experience, and mostly I just wanted to speak to the dark night of the soul, kind of in a way that might feel validating or supportive. It's really heavy. It's really challenging, and I think that the current astrology for July 2026 is so intense and so powerful. And even if you're watching this months later, it's still impacting you because it's will have happened. And uh, astrologers are saying that there are configurations in our skies that have literally never been seen in human history, which what that means is that they can't look at what happened, 500 years ago or 5,000 years ago or whatever, and overlay it to what's happening now to kind of see what now would rhyme with, what it would kind of resonate with, what kind of history might be repeating itself in some form. And so, in some ways, our entire culture, our entire world is going through the unknown, through this dark night of the soul in its own way, which is why I wanted to make this video, because I know I'm part of the whole. I'm part of all of you. You are part of all of me. If you're still watching this, if you're still listening, it's because you're resonating on some level, or you just like me and you want to watch my videos. Either way, I'm really grateful. Thank you for being here. Feel free to share in the comments how you're feeling, whether this resonates, what other aspects of the Dark Night I didn't mention. I know there are many, and I didn't intend to make this a complete treatise by any stretch. But please share. And I do work with clients, and I have worked with clients going through their own dark night. And part of the blessing and the gratitude that I feel is knowing what it's like, at least on the inside for me. I obviously can't feel into and know what it's like for anyone else. But it's one of those things where we are both unique unto ourselves and also part of each other. And I feel that uh, the ability to hold space for someone who's going through this kind of deep, dark, messy desert process is within me, and I'm honored to do so for others and for any other deep inner work that you may need to do. Many, many blessings. I'll see you in the next video.